Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Frosty Explain. Welcome back to the third episode of this series. And if you are new on the channel, please check out my previous videos uploaded on the channel and especially check out the playlist section. If you are love this kind of videos, I'm sure you will find something really interesting there. And if you like this kind of thing or you are new on this series, you should subscribe and turn on the bell icon for upcoming episode of this series and many others which are still uploading on the channel. So without any more delay, let's begin a small summary of this episode. Last episodes has been on the death and the rebirth of Ash Ketchum and how he has Mewtwo and he has also become Mewtwo. That's really interesting. So we will continue to gain more info on these, and without any more delay, we should begin this episode. So what will happen when Ash start his journey as a Mewtwo? Let's begin.
Nidorino lunged an attack at the Gengar he was facing. Why jab, don't jab, you jab, hold still. Gengar laughed as he dodged left and right, avoiding the horn attack aimed at him. Sorry, but he jumped up and bounced off Nidorino's head before landing on the other side before turning around and watched the poison type getting up. I don't feel like getting poisoned. Why don't you? He brought his palms up and began to send out his attack. Take a nap. Oh, and Gengar sends out its hypnosis. This looks like the end of the battle. No, wait. Nidorino was enveloped in red light before he converted into the same red energy and brought back into his Pokeball. The trainer then brought out another Pokeball that had a green top and threw it. The ball opened up and a bright light burst out before it changed shape into a large rock snake. And he sends out Onix. Looks like the trainer wants to rock this battle to its core. Onix moved into a tackle and tried to hit Gengar. Gengar jumped out of the way and faced off the Pokemon that was much larger than him. It looks like this battle can go either way, so we are just going to have to see who comes out the winner. Ash pumped his fist as he watched the TV of the battle. Wonder how Gengar is going to get out of this one. Ash Ketchum, the 10-year-old boy, watched on his TV at the battle that had taken place a year ago. It was a taped event of the previous battle of the Pokemon League. He usually watched this whenever he felt like pumping himself up about the coming journey he was about to go on. He had begged his mother to let him go off on a Pokemon journey like the other kids from Pallet Town were going to do when the time came. It had taken a lot of nights of begging on his knees and whining until she finally said yes. He had been so happy when he heard her answer despite the rules she said that he would have to follow. Ash grabbed his Pokemon League Expo hat and placed it on his head. Tomorrow is the day. I will finally be able to go on my Pokemon journey. He grabbed a Pokeball that he had on his desk and posed with it in his hand, and I promise to befriend all the Pokemon I catch and become a Pokemon master. Ash, go to bed. Ash tripped and fell on his back, letting go of the Pokeball and sent it flying. Delia caught the Pokeball and opened it to show that it was 11 petameters. It is way past your bedtime. Ash got on his knees and leaned on the Snorlax plushie he had on the ground. Ah, come on, Mima. I start my journey tomorrow. I'm too excited to sleep. Delia sighed to herself at how excited Ash could be, and when it came to this journey he had the energy to spare. She had said no to the journey the first time he ever said he wanted to go on the journey. She had allowed him to go to the Pokemon camp since she knew someone there that would keep an eye on him and do everything they could to keep his secret. But this was different. After he begged her to let him go, she relented but set some rules for him to follow. Delia walked over to Ash and grabbed the remote as she changed the channel to a local broadcast that Professor Oak used for either Pokemon lectures or his poetry. On the TV was Professor Oak as he spoke about the upcoming Pokemon journey that a few of the kids in Pallet Town were going to go on. Once the channel was changed, she knelt down to be eye level with her son. Ash, do you remember the rules that I gave you? Ash nodded as he was used to hearing this from his mother, Mima. She had made sure that he remembered the rules as he didn't want to worry her about it. He did think some of them were weird, but he chose not to question his mom about it. I remember. Good, now I want you to follow them to the letter. And I will know if you don't, she said as she gave him a scary look, making sure he knew how serious she was. Ash chuckled nervously as he didn't know why she said that she would know if he didn't do any of them. It almost made him think that she could be part psychic Pokemon. I promised to do them all, Mima. Delia sighed and hoped that he would do them as a way to protect him. She prayed to Arceus that nothing would happen to him, but she had a sinking feeling that he would find himself in some sort of trouble. Okay, Ash, she got up and made her way out of his room. At the doorway, she turned and sternly said, "When the program is over, I want you to go straight to B." Okay, Mom. And make sure you put on your pajamas. Ash grimaced a bit as he always thought his pajamas were weird. They were all oversized, especially his pants, but they were the only ones he could sleep in comfortably. He had tried wearing just a normal pair of boxers, shorts or pants, and a simple white shirt, but every time he did, he would wake up feeling sore all over, especially his legs and butt. There were also times where he would wake up with his boxers, shorts, or pants ripped to shreds. After it happened a few times, he figured that he would just go with what his mother got him to wear. Delia sat on the couch thinking about tomorrow. She wanted to deny Ash the right to go on the journey, but she wanted to make sure he was happy. She sighed as she got up from the couch and made her way to the phone to call Nurse Joy. "Hello Joy, it's me. Opening curly bracket closing curly bracket. Yes, it's tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure that it was all ready. Opening curly bracket closing curly bracket. Okay. I just want to make sure that he will be safe. Opening curly bracket closing curly bracket. I know he will, but you know this isn't normal. Opening curly bracket closing curly bracket." Delia giggled at what her friend had said about Ash. "Yes, he is." Her smile dropped as she said, "And that is what worries me." It was now midnight and Delia made her way up the stairs towards Ash's room. Ash said he couldn't sleep due to his excitement, she couldn't sleep due to worry. She slowly opened his door and peeked inside. She knew that Ash was a very heavy sleeper, but she always tried to be as quiet as possible when she came to check on him as to not cause any sort of distress to his sleep. She moved inside and made her way to the side of Ash's bed, and there he was, tail and all. Ash was sprawled out in his bed with the sheets thrown off him, his shirt had ridden up showing his torso and his tail had forced his pants down. This was why she got him very loose shirt and pants and shorts. His change in form would cause him to contort himself in ways that would be uncomfortable for a normal person. The different body structure would rip apart normal clothing, and if they didn't rip, they would constrict him, and she could only imagine how uncomfortable it must be for his tail. She got on her knees and ran her hand over the top of his head and over one of his horns. After a minute of doing this, she got back to her feet and walked out the door. "He will be fine. I know it." Once Delia left the room, Ash began to mumble nothing in particular. A small bit of light could be seen behind his eyelids as his Pokeball alarm clock began to levitate. After a second of this, it was sent flying. Ash kept mumbling as he began to dream. Bubbles. Water. Light. That was all he could see. Ripples on the water surface. Who am I? Who am I? Underwater grass flows with the shift of water as a small pink creature swims past it. What am I? What am I? Fast moving under the water surface until bursting through and into the sky, above a large forest, and the pink Pokemon flying over said forest towards a mountain in the distance. Where am I? A Mankey swinging around before it stepped and started to jump around. A group of Pokemon jumping around and playing around and being happy. A pair of brown eyes looking onto a rippling water surface. Who are you? Rippling water reflecting the mountain, shifting its blue colors to an amber coloration with the mountain still reflected. I am ready to be. Bubbles. Gurgle. Opening his eyes, he found himself submerged in an orange liquid with large bubbles gurgling around him. Where am I? He noticed that unlike before, the water he was under was not tranquil or beautiful as figures could be seen in front of him. This is not the same. He felt great distress as he came to that realization. Was everything before just a dream? He thought about the visions he had as he questioned, why? Doctor, look at this. What? It's brainwaves. They're surging. Let me see. Multiple voices began to talk amongst themselves as they began to pick up in speed and worry. Rippling water, reflecting the mountain. He opened his eye as he heard them, those voices. Rippling water. I hope we don't lose this one. He heard them continue to talk there outside. The pink Pokemon swimming past the swaying grass. We can't lose this one. The brown eyes reflected back that seemed both familiar and foreign to him. He felt a need that he must grasp, where I must be. His pupil gained a blue glow as he pulsed his powers. The tank that he floated inside began to crack before bursting, catching the scientist's attention. Radio Giovanni's helicopter, tell him what happened. Dr. Fuji grew excited to see that even though the tank had burst, the subject was still alive. Quiet. Let us hear its psychic powers. Mewtwo looked up as he felt confused about what was going on. Psychic powers. Dr. Fuji began to explain to Mewtwo what he was. For years we struggled to successfully clone a Pokemon to prove our theories. He then gestured to a large image of the Mew carving they discovered at the shrine they went to when they went to retrieve a DNA sample. That is Mew, the rarest of all Pokemon. From its DNA we created you, Mewtwo. Mewtwo looked towards the image, MEWT.2. Am I only a copy? Nothing but Mew's shadow. You are greater than Mew, improved by the power of human ingenuity. We used the most advanced techniques to improve your awesome powers. Mewtwo thought about what he was told, so I am nothing more than the end result of your experiment. What becomes of me now that your experiment is now over? Dr. Fuji's excitement grew as he thought of what came next. Oh, our experiment isn't over yet, it's just beginning. Now the serious testing begins. Mewtwo felt irritated as he saw how they viewed him. These humans, they care nothing for me. He watched as they began to congratulate each other. He looked down at his hands as he heard several comments that angered him more. Is the new tank ready? No, we'll have to come up with a cage for it. At least this one survived compared to the last one. Mewtwo clenched his fingers together as he remembered the vision he had. Mew flying off towards a mountain. Brown eyes looking back at him. Is that my purpose? Am I just an experiment? A laboratory specimen? His anger reached its peak as he gained a blue aura around him. This cannot be my destiny. Tanks began to crack as his power began to surge. Mewtwo's eyes glowed blue before he levitated into the air, spread out his arms, and sent the scientist lying and destroying the cloning machine. No, not again. Mechanical arms sprung out of the walls and grabbed at Mewtwo, attempting to restrain him, but they were shattered when he created a bubble of psychic energy. Dr. Fuji panicked as he saw that this Mewtwo was consciously aiming to destroy the lab. He ran to a computer and typed in a few keys into as a bar appeared on the screen and began to speak as the destruction behind him continued. I haven't got much time. I pray this record of our experiment survives. 11 years ago, we discovered a fossil that proved to be of the ancient Pokemon, Mew. He looked back to see that the other scientists were trying their hardest to escape but were caught by psychic energy and thrown into the explosions. There was sufficient genetic material to replicate Mew, but Giovanni, who funded our project, insisted that we create super clones far more powerful than any living Pokemon for him to control. Many normal Pokemon attempts failed as well as one failed Mew clone, but finally, we reached success with the final attempt. We called it Mewtwo. Dr. Fuji jumped as debris fell on his right. But for some reason, the creature's anger is out of control. Using its psychic powers to destroy our laboratory, he stopped as an explosion forced him away from the computer and onto the ground. He looked around to see the bodies of his fellow scientists, and the lab was completely destroyed with fires lighting up the area. He winced as he felt his arm had been broken as he saw a silhouette in the flames before the fire split to show Mewtwo floating there. Mewtwo floated closer to Dr. Fuji and glared down at the scientist that created him. He lifted his hand and using his power to grip around the doctor's throat and brought the scientist to float just a few feet away from him. Dr. Fuji saw the hate the Pokemon had in his eyes and knew that nothing he could do would deter Mewtwo from what he was about to do. Despite the grip he felt around his throat, he could not help but say, "We dreamed of creating the world's strongest Pokemon." An orb of blue energy enveloped both Mewtwo and the doctor as the energy began to burn away the doctor's clothes. And we succeeded. As the energy began to burn more intensely, he had a vision of two specific individuals. His daughter, who he wanted so desperately to bring back, Amber, and the young Mewtwo child they had brought into the world only to die 1 month after its creation. Forgive me. Mewtwo then let his power burst as the psychic energy expended, destroying Dr. Fuji, the other scientist bodies, and caused the lab to explode. Mewtwo now stood amongst the flames of the now destroyed lab. Before he destroyed the doctor, he caught a glimpse of the last thing he thought. "So I am the result of your second attempt. Did you think that if he had survived, he would forgive you for creating him and just seeing him as just an experiment? A young one created solely for the purpose of your experiments is not something that should be forgiven." He looked up at the moon as he thought about the young Mewtwo that had not survived. "Would you have been as angry as I was? What would have happened had you survived? Would I still be here, or would you have taken my place in the world?" He looked down in sadness at the first Mewtwo. "In the end, I take a place that could have been yours." He then stood resolute, the strongest Pokemon in the world. Stronger even than Mew. He then heard the sound of a helicopter and turned around to see it land. A man in a red suit come out with a Persian walking towards him. "It's morning. It's morning," was the morning call of a Dodrio that stood on top of one of the houses in Pallet Town. Ash screamed as he jolted into a sitting position. He was breathing heavily and looked around him to see that he was in his room. He yawned before he ran his hand through his hair. Man, what a weird dream. A mountain, and a weird pink Pokemon. As he thought about the rest of the dream, realized that he couldn't remember most of it. He did remember a glimpse of some weird people that he didn't know, but he couldn't see their faces, but that was it. Well, apart from the pink Pokemon flying towards the mountain. He knows that he never saw that Pokemon before, but for some reason, he couldn't help but think that he does. Oh well, he got up and out of bed as his PJ pants fell down, leaving him in the nude. He couldn't help but blush at this, as this was one of the reasons that he didn't really like them, since this happened a lot. He bent down to pick them up, and as he did this, he then noticed that his alarm clock was on the ground and in pieces. He then heard a knock on his door. Delia came in to see her son, with his pants down and staring at something on the ground. This surprised her as she spoke. "Ash. What are you still doing here? I thought you had already left." "Mima, what time is it?" Delia sighed as she said, "It's 8:24. Ash immediately began to panic when he heard the time. He threw off his PJs, not caring that his mother saw him naked. It's his mother, as he ran around to grab his clothes and get dressed as fast as he could. Delia couldn't help but smile, as this was one interesting way for him to start his journey. She stepped aside as he finally put on his hat and ran past her and downstairs. As she heard the front door open and close, she looked back into his room and smiled at how absent-minded her son can be. She moved inside and picked up his pack that they had set up for him. He is so forgetful. She then left to head downstairs and walk to Professor Oak's lab to give it to him before he went off on his journey. Ash was running as fast as he could to Professor Oak's lab and was hoping that he wasn't too late to get a Pokemon. "How did my alarm clock get broken anyway? And why today of all days?" Exclamation mark quote. He could feel himself getting tired, but he didn't care. He wanted to get his Pokemon so he could go on his journey. Soon enough he saw the lab and a large group of people standing in front of it. He then saw that Gary was posing in front of the crowd on a red convertible with a cheer squad. I always wondered what the point of that squad was. As he was getting closer, he could hear him boasting about getting the best Pokemon. Something Ash forgot to do when he left home was to tie his shoes, and it finally got to him as he got close and tripped on them, sliding face first right in front of Gary. Well, looks like you finally made it, Ashi boy. Too bad for you, you're too late. I already got the best Pokemon my grandpa had." Ash got up to his feet and smiled at Gary. "Really? Which one did you get?" Gary scoffed as he flipped his hair. "Why should I show you? What are you even doing here? It's not like you can be a Pokemon trainer, much less a master. Ash's smile dropped as he glared at Gary. Hey. Take that back. Gary gave a cocky smirk as he spun his Pokeball on his finger. He then gained a teasing smile as he looked to Ash. Maybe I should show you my Pokemon so you can talk to it like you can understand it. He laughed at Ash's. Some in the crowd chuckled as well. Ash grit his teeth as he hated it when Gary made fun of his ability to talk to Pokemon. He wanted so badly to tell Gary that he can understand Pokemon, but he promised his mother that he wouldn't. Gary then felt that he had enough fun with Ash and sat on the hood of the car. Well, tough luck for you, Ashi boy. There aren't any more Pokemon to get, so you're just going to have to sit at home and watch on TV as I become a Pokemon master. Ash gritted his teeth as he heard Gary's cheer squad begin a chant about how great Gary was. He then watched as Gary was driven away in the convertible. After the car was gone, everyone dispersed and went off to do their own thing, leaving Ash alone. Ash shook his head before he ran up the stairs towards the lab. He opened the door and walked in looking for the professor. Professor Oak, are you here? He heard some crashing from deeper in the lab until he saw an old man walk out as he shook his leg. That is the last time I let that mock-up help me move things around. Professor Oak looked up and smiled at seeing Ash arrive. Ah, Ash, I was expecting you. He then looked at the clock. Well, actually, I was expecting you to be here earlier, but at least you arrived. Ash smiled as he walked up to the professor. Yeah, somehow my alarm got broken. Anyway, do you have any Pokemon left for me to have? Ash was bouncing in place as he was hoping that the professor still had a Pokemon to give. Oak rubbed the back of his head as he nervously looked anywhere but at the boy. Actually, Ash, sorry to say, but I'm all out of Pokemon, _ a Pokemon lab, and he is out of Pokemon, right? Ash deflated as he heard this before he looked up at the older man pleadingly. Don't you have any Pokemon you can give? Sorry, Ash, but if you had arrived on time you would have gotten one of the 3 that I had. Why don't you have any more? Oak now looked sheepish as he couldn't look the boy in the eye as this was embarrassing for him. Well, we had a last-minute addition to the kids going out on a journey and she got the last remaining one. Ash was now kneeling in a corner with an aura of depression, and I really wanted to go on a journey today. Oak looked at the depressed boy and tried to think of what he could do to let Ash go on his journey. It was then he remembered something. Actually, I just remembered, I do have one Pokemon that you might be able to take. In an instant, Ash was in front of the professor with stars in his eyes. Really? Oka chuckled at the boy's excitement before he nodded and gestured for the boy to follow him. They made their way to where the 3 empty Pokeballs were. Why are they even there? Shouldn't the trainers have taken them? He moved to a computer that was on the side and pressed a button, which caused a mechanical pedestal to appear from the floor with a single Pokeball on it. Once it was up, he grabbed the Pokeball and showed it to the boy. Now I caught this Pokemon only 2 days ago and it isn't very fond of humans. I'll take it. Oak looked to Ash with a look of trepidation. Are you sure? It is a stubborn one. Ash nodded as he picked the Pokeball from Oak's hand. I really want to go on my journey, so I will just have to befriend it. After he took a breath to prepare himself, he released the Pokemon that was inside. He waited to see what it was and smiled as he saw the light take form. It was a Pikachu. Pikachu shook as the light faded until it looked up at a pair of brown eyes looking at it. Oh great, another human. Ash smiled at the Pikachu. Ah, she's cute. Professor Oak went a bit wide-eyed as he was surprised that he deduced that the Pikachu was female. I'm impressed, Ash. I didn't know you knew the different tail shapes that showed the differences between a male and a female. Ash then looked at Pikachu's tail and saw that it had a bit of a heart-shaped tip, which he figured was what the professor meant. Actually, he just figured her gender based on her voice rather than the tail, but he chose to go with it. Well, I read about it before. Though he was a bad liar and it was very unconvincing. At least to Pikachu. The professor bought the lie and nodded. Ash then knelt down and smiled at Pikachu. Hi Pikachu. I'm Ash, your new trainer. He tried to pet her, but the second he placed his hand on her head he was met with an electric shock as Pikachu unleashed her Thundershock. Professor Oak stood to the side as Ash got electrocuted. She is known as an electric mouse. It's usually quite shy but can be aggressive at times. Pikachu stopped shocking him and he shook himself as his body now felt somewhat numb. You don't say. Shocking, isn't it? The professor then moved to a table and grabbed a few items that he had prepped for the boy. Walking back, he handed Ash a Pokédex and a set of Pokeballs. Here. I have already registered you in the Pokédex, so with this you're all set. Ash took the items before he smiled at the professor. Thanks, Professor. He then looked at Pikachu with the smile still on his face. Come on, Pikachu. Pikachu crossed her arms before looking away. Why should I go anywhere with you? Ash nervously looked between her and the professor before he knelt down to be closer to her. Please, Pikachu. I really want us to be friends and go on a journey together. Pikachu would have just made another comment, but something about this human caught her attention. He smelled like a Pokemon. Well, the professor smelled like Pokemon as well, but instead of having the scent on him like the old man, the boy smelled like he was a Pokemon. She shook her head as she just chose to make her way towards the door as Ash followed her out. Once they made it outside, Ash saw that his mother was standing there waiting for him. Mima. What are you doing here? This caught Pikachu's attention. Did he just call her Mima? Only Pokemon call their parents that. Why is this human calling her that, and how does he even know about that? Delia shifted her eyes to the professor who just left his lab and was heading their way. She was thankful that he was far enough away. Ash. Ash felt embarrassed at his slip-up and looked back to see the professor walking up to them. He looked back at his mother as he nodded. Sorry, Mom. Delia nodded in satisfaction as she let her son walk closer to him. She brought up his backpack. You forgot this back home. Ash looked at the pack wide-eyed as he reached behind him to feel if he had anything on his back, only to chuckle in embarrassment as he realized that he didn't have it on his back. Oh. Delia smiled as she handed Ash the bag before looking down at Pikachu. Is that your Pokemon? Ash smiled as he gestured to Pikachu. Yep. This is Pikachu. Delia then looked confused, but why isn't it in its Pokeball? Ash then came to a realization. Oh right, he pulled out Pikachu's Pokeball as he pointed it at her. Pikachu, return. Pikachu jumped out of the way of the beam. Don't even think about it. No way am I going back in there. Ash looked surprised at this and looked to his mom. I don't think she wants to go back in her ball. Delia had an odd look on her face before she nodded and moved closer to Pikachu. Ash, do you mind if I ask Pikachu something? Ash looked down at Pikachu and back at his mom. Well, I guess, but it's up to her really. Pikachu was confused about this. What would she want to ask me? I don't even know her. She then found herself being picked up and moved away from the others. She would have shocked her for even daring to touch her, but she was too curious about what this human wanted to ask her. Once Delia was sure that they were out of earshot, she put Pikachu down and knelt down in front of the Pokemon. Pikachu. I want to ask you a favor. Now this caught her attention as this wasn't something she expected. Delia sighed as she realized that she was talking to a Pokemon as if it was a normal thing. She wondered how Ash did it when he talked to so many other Pokemon he ran into. Pikachu, I want you to protect Ash. She saw the incredulous look Pikachu had but continued nonetheless. Ash is special. There is something about him that not even he knows, and I want to keep it that way, but since you don't like being inside your Pokeball and are going with him on his journey, you are going to find out soon, so I want you to make sure that he is safe from any bad people out there. Pikachu looked at the woman in confusion. The way she was asking this, it was like someone was after the kid and would hurt him the moment they did find him. When, she gulped as this was something that she never thought she would have to tell anyone. When he goes to sleep, he will change and I worry about anyone finding out. I beg you to look after him and protect him no matter what. He is special to me, and she now had tears in her eyes as her worry grew. I lost him once. I don't want to lose him again. She was now giving out silent sobs as she thought about what the people that created her son would do to him if they find him. She didn't want to think about it, but she knew she couldn't avoid it. Pikachu was stunned. This wasn't something she expected to hear from the human. She said that she lost him once and the way it was said meant that he had died on her at one time. She didn't know the details and doubted she could get them from the crying woman, but the heartfelt plea that she was given made her look past the woman to the boy who was talking with the professor as they looked at the Pokédex. What more could she do other than nod her head at the woman? Delia smiled as she wiped the tears away. Thank you, Pikachu. She pet Pikachu on the head as the female Pokemon smiled at the contact, and please, when you find out, don't tell Ash. Ash and the professor finished looking over the Pokédex's features in time to see the two females returning. Ash smiled at the two as they approached. Did you finish asking Pikachu what you wanted to ask? Seeing his mom nod, his curiosity got to him. So what did you ask her? Delia smiled at her son as she said, just to make sure you put on clean underwear every day. Everyone face faulted at this as this was something none of them expected. Mom. Delia laughed at this. Later, Ash and Pikachu were now on the road of Route 1. Pikachu was eyeing the trainer in front of her as if he was a puzzle that she couldn't figure out. What makes him so special? He doesn't seem all that. Suddenly Ash stopped and looked at Pikachu. Hey Pikachu, what was it that my Mima asked you? Pikachu stopped and looked at Ash as this had bugged her since she heard him say it. Okay, how in the name of Mew and Arceus do you know that word and why are you using it on her? She puffed out her cheeks as she knew that he wouldn't be able to understand her question. Ash rubbed the back of his head as he thought about the question. Well, no one really told me about the word. I just call her that from times like I already knew the word. She does tell me that I shouldn't call her that when there are other people around, but sometimes I just can't help it. Pikachu paused as she heard him answer her question. She slowly looked into his eyes and slowly asked, Did you understand me? Ash looked sheepish as he rubbed the back of his head and nodded. Yeah. I can understand Pokemon. I thought it was normal when I was younger, but Mima told me that it wasn't for people to be able to understand Pokemon the way I do. Pikachu's jaw was on the ground as she could not believe this. A human understood what she was saying. Not guessing or interpreting as best he could, he understood her as if it was a normal thing. Was this what she meant by special? So what did Mom ask you anyway? Pikachu thought about her conversation with the boy's mother and remembered the last thing they discussed. She just asked me to make sure that you put on clean underwear every day. Ash slumped at this. Oh come on Mima. Pikachu shook her head at the boy's antics. Anyway, how can you understand me anyway? Ash shrugged as he got back up and began to walk with Pikachu following him. Don't know. Ever since I was able to speak, I have always been able to speak with Pokemon. I always thought it was cool, but Mima told me to never let anyone know about it, so I kept it a secret from everyone except Pokemon. Pikachu had a sneaking suspicion that this wasn't the real secret. She felt that there was something else about this. After a few minutes of walking, Ash suddenly stopped in his tracks. Oh. Pikachu looked up at her trainer, even if she was really reluctant to call him that. What is it? Ash began to look around as if he was worried about being attacked. I just remembered that there was a flock of Spearow that live here that really don't like humans or other Pokemon for that matter. Pikachu tilted her head as she asked, how many? A lot. Pikachu didn't like the sound of that and now grew worried. Then let's move it. Ash nodded as the two began to run through Route 1 with the hopes that they could get through without seeing any Spearow. As they ran through, Ash heard something that made him worry. Intruder. Intruder, intruder. Attack, attack. It sounded like some Spearow, but it sounded like they were attacking something and it wasn't them. He looked around to see if he could see the Spearow and what they were attacking. Then his eyes caught the red coloring of the Spearow's wings and saw that they were attacking something. His instincts just kicked in and he ran towards the flock. What are you doing? Was Pikachu's response to him running into the forest. She ran after him as she made a promise to make sure that he didn't get into trouble. Ash saw that the Spearows were pecking at something that was laying on the ground and he just jumped in. Hey, leave it alone. Intruder, intruder. Attack, attack. Ash jumped in and covered the thing they were attacking with his body and winced as he felt the pecks and scratches that were pelting his back. Chew. The attack stopped and Ash looked up to see that Pikachu was now their target with a few laying on the ground unconscious. Ash quickly picked up what he was covering and ran towards Pikachu before picking her up as well and ran. He ran as fast as he could and panicked more as he heard the Spearow behind him call out to the rest of the flock. He looked behind him to see that the 5 or so that were once chasing him grew into the hundreds with a few Fearow joining in. Ah! He pushed his legs as hard as they could take him and he ran away from the flock. He felt a few of them get close and peck at his head. He wanted to swat at them but he couldn't with his hands full. After a minute of running, he saw a cliff with the sound of water under it. Pikachu, hang on. Pikachu was confused at what he said until she saw where they were heading and her eyes grew wide as she gripped his jacket tight. You're crazy. It's the only way to get away. He gripped the 2 Pokemon in his arms close to his chest and put on a small burst of speed as he jumped off the cliff. Splash. Riverside. Misty was enjoying her time fishing on this little spot. She had caught a few Pokemon on her lure but she released them back as although she was looking for a Pokemon to add to her team, she didn't need to catch everything she caught on her lure. She was lucky enough to catch a Goldeen and was looking forward to training it to evolve it into a Seeking. She looked up and saw that rain clouds were starting to form. I better pack up soon. It was then she felt a strong pull on her lure and she grew excited at what it might be. She got to her feet and pulled as hard as she could. I hope it's not that Gyarados from before. After a strong tug she pulled out her catch. Ash screamed as he was sent flying in the air and back onto solid ground. He made sure that he landed on his back so the Pokemon in his arms wouldn't be hurt. Pikachu shook herself of the water as she panted for air. She couldn't help but shudder at what almost happened. I thought that Gyarados was going to eat us. Ash was also panting for air as he agreed with her statement. I thought the same thing. Misty saw that it was a boy that she caught on her lure. Why would some guy? She looked him over until what he was holding in his arms got her attention. Oh, are they hurt? Ash shook his head of water and answered, I think we are okay. He looked down at Pikachu to see if she was hurt and then he finally got a good look at the Pokemon he saved. It was a small quadrupedal Pokemon that had brown fur with long ears and a bushy tail. It was an Eevee. He could see that it was hurt from all the scratches on its body and was unconscious. Oh no, I have to get it to a Pokemon Center. Misty got to her feet as she humped at him. Well, don't just sit there. Get going. Ash got to his feet, whether by his own volition or by her order was unclear. He looked down at the Eevee he had before looking at her with worry evident in his eyes. Where is the nearest Pokemon Center? Misty pointed down the road to her left. Just head that way and you'll reach Viridian City. Ash felt relief flow through his body as he shifted the Pokemon in his arms. Thanks. He was about to begin to run in the direction the girl pointed but he heard the flock of Spearow and Fearow he thought he got away from approaching fast. He looked back to see that they were indeed heading his way. Oh no. He looked around and saw a bike leaning on a tree. He ran towards it, put Eevee in the basket with Pikachu on his shoulder, mounted it, and rode off. Misty ran after him as she shouted, Hey, that's my bike. Ash turned his head back. Sorry. I'm borrowing it for now. You better hide or the Spearow might see you. I'll give it back in Viridian. Misty glared at the boy's back before she turned around and saw the flock of Spearow and Fearow. She ran into the forest and hid behind a tree as the flock flew by. When she knew that the coast was clear, she moved out and looked in the direction the boy went. I hope those 3 come out okay. Ash was pedaling as hard as he could to both get away from the attacking birds and to get Eevee to the center. As he pedaled he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up and he looked up to see that it was starting to rain. Oh no. To add to the problems, the flock had caught up to him and he and Pikachu were being pecked at repeatedly. Pikachu was swatting at them as she couldn't use her electric attacks as she was on the one that was using the bike. Due to this, she began to suffer significant damage. Ash was swatting at the Spearow until a Fearow swooped down and its beak grazed his arm, leaving a gash on it. Arg, thanks to this, he fell off the bike and into the mud with Pikachu and the unconscious Eevee falling to the ground. Ash immediately looked up to see the flock diving towards him and the two Pokemon. He got up and jumped over to Pikachu and Eevee and covered them with his body. Pikachu looked up and saw him wincing in pain from the scratches and pecks he got from the flock. Why is he going this far for us? He barely even knows me. Ash slipped his arms out of his jacket before grabbing it and swung it behind him, getting the flock to back off for a minute. Taking this brief moment of reprieve, he turned around and picked Eevee up and placed it on Pikachu's back. Pikachu, I need you to get Eevee to Viridian City. Pikachu looked at the Eevee now on her back before looking back up at him. But what about you? Don't worry about me. I'll buy you as much time as I can. Ash turned around and faced the flock. Go. Pikachu hesitated for a second before she moved as fast as she could towards the city. Ash faced the flock and stood his ground. Spearow. I am Ash Ketchum. I started this journey to go out and see the world and meet as many Pokemon I can. I will continue my journey no matter what you do to me. So do your worst. I can take it. Pikachu paused as she heard this. Despite the very last part almost sounding like a Pokemon cry, she looked back and saw the flock behind their dive. He won't live through that. At this thought, she put Eevee down and ran. She just moved on pure instinct as she ran up his back, onto his shoulder, and jumped in between the flock and him. Do-N-T-U. Touch. Hi, M. Lightning struck the instant Pikachu unleashed her Thunderbolt, boosting her power to amazing levels and sent out a shockwave at the whole flock. Ash was sent off his feet as the shockwave hit him as well. Ash felt his whole body twitch as he opened his eyes. He turned his head to see Pikachu laying at his side and he couldn't help but smile. Thanks for coming back. Pikachu smiled back, you're welcome. Ash slowly got up from the ground, ignoring the pain he was in before picking up Pikachu and held her in his arms. He then turned around and saw Eevee was laying on the ground where he figured Pikachu left it and unharmed from the Thunderbolt. As he made his way towards it, he saw a few Spearow on the ground unconscious. He thought about catching one of them, but after what he went through, he didn't think he would ever feel comfortable catching one. He moved and picked up Eevee and held them both close to him and began his trek to Viridian. After a bit of walking, he heard a large call in the air that was different from the Spearow or Fearow. Looking up, he saw that the rain began to die down and the skies cleared of clouds. He smiled as a large rainbow appeared in the sky and a beautiful Pokemon flew overhead. Wow, what Pokemon is that? As if to answer him, his Pokédex activated. Unknown species, some Pokemon have yet to be discovered and catalogued. Ash looked down at his Pokédex before looking back up and smile. He saw that it flew right over him and to his surprise something fell from it. He saw it float down back and forth until it landed in between Pikachu and Eevee. He looked down and saw that it was a feather of rainbow colors. It's beautiful. Pikachu nodded as she looked at it. Yes, it is. Ash smiled at Pikachu. Do you mind holding it? Pikachu lifted herself up and grabbed the feather before laying back down. Ash then continued to walk to the city. Above them, Ho-Oh smiled down at the young trainer as she flew. Good luck on your journey, young one. Ash walked up a hill and stopped as he stood at its top. There he saw the city. We made it. Pikachu smiled at the sight before she lifted herself up a bit and licked Ash's cheek. Thanks for trying to save us. Ash smiled at Pikachu as he nodded. Thanks for saving me. As if they both knew what the other was going to say, they said the same thing to each other. Anytime. Ash then made his way into the city and straight to the Pokemon Center to heal his passengers.